That's right.
Was there when the protests erupted on Sunday and has more now from Tel Aviv.
As the saying goes, if you're going to shoot at the king, you'd better not miss. And it seems that Israel's now ex-defense minister missed when he gave a press conference on Saturday evening and became the first minister to call for a halt to this government's judicial overhaul. Because when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returned from his weekend in London, he sacked Gallant. And the result of that is what you see behind me. Thousands and thousands of people on the streets of central Tel Aviv showing their support for Gallant in his opposition to this judicial overhaul and reiterating their opposition to an overhaul that would remove pretty much all checks and balances on the government, allowing it to put its allies in the Supreme Court and preventing the Supreme Court from striking down laws passed by Parliament, except in very narrow circumstances. Now, since this announcement by Netanyahu, since it came out that he had sacked Gallant, these people have come out onto the streets. They're usually out on the streets for the past 3 months on Saturday evenings and on Thursdays. This is a Sunday evening. They are incredibly angry that this has happened. We've heard from opposition leaders like Yair Lapid, the former Prime Minister, and Benny Gantz, former Defense Minister, coming. Here we go again.
Main highway shouting Israel is not a dictatorship. Blowing air horns, blocking traffic and burning tires. Riot police deployed water cannon, drenching the crowds.
It's not a matter of left or right. It's a matter of pure, basic human rights that are being crushed daily.
Protests also broke out in Jerusalem, around the Israeli legislative building, and outside the home of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Shouting, shame, shame. The eruption came on the back of Netanyahu's firing of his defense minister for breaking ranks with the prime minister's hardline policies. The growing rift in our society is penetrating the Israeli defense.
Thousands of demonstrators are gathered there. You can see them there behind her. So, Margaret, thank you for joining us. What are things like right there?
Well, there's a bit of a party atmosphere, as you sometimes see at demonstrations like this. Lots of banging drums and music. But don't be mistaken, this is a very serious day, a very serious point in the history of Israel. The people who have come out today have accused the government of trying to hijack the independence of the Supreme Court. You see Israeli flags everywhere. People are holding up signs saying democracy or rebellion, because this has been going on now for weeks. And actually, if we just, I'm going to ask JF to turn around. Behind us, you can see through the flags some of the handmaids protesters here handing out obviously the red capes from Margaret Atwood's famous book. This is a protest that many people in Israel say that this legislation, this judicial overhaul, if it were to succeed, would impact women's rights. It is a protest against what the government, the defense minister said yesterday was the threat to the Israeli security, given the divisions that are being highlighted in Israeli society between secular and religious.
10 seconds later,
Israeli Supreme Court Justice Dalia Dorner. Like her friend, the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Dorner is a legal pioneer for women's rights. Rights she fears may slip away if the government grants itself new powers to overrule the court.
We don't have a constitution to protect us, to protect the individual and to protect the minorities. And by the way, we are women and we are a minority.
This is ultimately a fight about checks and balances. Netanyahu's opponents say a strong and independent Supreme Court is the only real check on the government's power.
Netanyahu's supporters today mounting a small pro-government protest outside the court.
We demand for the government to proceed, to continue with the judicial reform and not to stop.
Far-right members of Netanyahu's government also pushing through a change to Israeli law, clearing the way for new settlements in the northern West Bank. Israel forced settlers out of the area in 2005 and promised the Bush administration they would not return. Now the Biden administration accusing Israel of going back on its word.
The legislative changes announced today are particularly provocative and counterproductive. The action also represents a clear contradiction of undertakings the Israeli government made to the United States.
The U.S. fears it will exacerbate violence heading into the Islamic holy month of Ramadan, with Palestinian militants already mounting attacks in the West Bank and Israel, and Israeli forces carrying out deadly raids in the heart of Palestinian cities. Netanyahu looking for middle ground between his supporters and a frustrated White House, saying he welcomes an end to a discriminatory and humiliating law that prohibited Jews from living in the areas of the northern West Bank, but adding the government has no intention of establishing new settlements in these areas. Netanyahu showing no sign of backing down on his judicial overhaul. But neither are the protesters, young and young at heart, taking to the streets against him. And if there wasn't enough going on, the Syrian regime is accusing Israel of bombing the airport in the city of Aleppo. Israel's military is refusing to comment, but we do know Israel has carried out a campaign of strikes against Iranian targets inside Syria.
Thanks for watching our YouTube. Built on legends. And that legends are a way of understanding things greater than ourselves. Forces that shape our lives. Events that defy explanation. Individuals whose lives soar to the heavens or fall to the earth. This is how legends are born.